By faith, Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear, he prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is according to faith.
Well, good morning. It is wonderful to be with you all this morning. We always want to start off by welcoming our visitors. It's kind of a habit we do here, but truly, we are really just happy you are here with us. I want to take a quick second to pause. It's a special morning for me. I thank the eldership for allowing me this opportunity. I'm the last of my father's sons to get up and deliver a sermon. So for him, I think check mark complete, but there's a lot of important things with that, and I don't want to speculate too far on my dad, but I hope it makes him proud knowing that his 3 sons have now delivered sermons. We had him for a gospel meeting, did a great job. He's pinch-hitted for us a few times with this transitional phase while we're waiting for Chase, and we're really happy and thankful that he's coming in 2 weeks. Woo! But this has been kind of a contagious period. It's one of those things that I've been incredibly encouraged just seeing different guys get up here, give this a go. And it was so infectious that, sure enough, threw my hat in the ring. It's one of those things you get so caught up in the moment, then it actually settles in like, wait a minute, I actually got to do this. I didn't know what I'm signing up for. But I'm happy today's here. Looking out into the crowd, I see my 2 boys, and you guys hear my 2 boys all the time. So thank you for putting up with their loudness. I know it can be distracting with 2 children always blasting, but it's important for them to see me up here. It's important for them to see that I take this faith seriously enough to stand up here and share it with you all. And I hope one day if I live long enough, they definitely have the vocals for it, so hopefully they'll just pop up here and do something. I'm able to see them serve in some way. That's my dream. All right, enough of the sensitive stuff. We're going to move on. So this morning, we're going to take a look at a couple different Bible scenes, 4 in particular. Now, the Bible does a really good job at giving us little snapshots. We get a story, we get a character, we get background information, we get enough of, hey, this happened to this person, and then we're on to the next story. And so forth. The Bible has to cover a lot of ground, and so that's just kind of how we see through the progression of the Bible. Story, 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 story. But a lot of times in these stories, we're given just enough information, just what happened to them, and then we're moving on. When we have those jumps, it just leaves me wondering, well, what happened? A huge event just happened here. I wonder how that impacted these people. Now, when we take this approach, we're going to have to be a little careful because we don't have a lot of these answers. We don't know, really, the Bible just doesn't reveal to us what happened. So, if you'll allow it, we're going to take a little bit of a speculative approach, but in so doing, we're going to tread very lightly because we want to make sure, above all else, we are still rooted firmly in biblical foundations. Our reading this morning was from the book of Hebrews. It's about Noah. We know about Noah. At that time, we read in Genesis, the world had just turned far from God. So far from God, the world had turned, he said, enough. Enough. I'm starting over. I'm going to wipe it clean. Can you imagine that? Just sit and think for a second how far the world must have gotten for God just to say, I'm done. What do you think Noah thought of? His family was the only one to be saved out of the entire world? Whew. Glad it's us. It's crazy to think through. We don't get these answers, but we know what happens. We know that Noah built the ark, not even fully realizing really probably what a flood was at that time. I doubt he understood the scope of what the flood would even be. I doubt he understood the ramifications, but nonetheless, he built the ark. As the story goes on, we see what happens. Noah, his wife, Noah's 3 sons, their wives, they all get on the boat. All the animals, 2 by 2, all get on the boat. Door closes. Flood. Well, they spent a long time on that boat. I don't know if you've ever been on a cruise or not. I've been on one. Now they say per study, The average person on a week-long cruise gains about 7 to 10 pounds. I can attest to that. 24-hour room service and 2 a.m. steak sandwiches, that absolutely happened. But I doubt that's anything similar to what Noah experienced on that boat. They spent a long time on that boat, a long time. Well, then the waters subside. The boat lands. And we see how the story goes. We know the door opens. We know Noah gets off. He builds the altar. Sacrifices are made. We know there's a promise between God and Noah. We know the symbol of the rainbow was created to symbolize his promise. But have you ever peeled it back and just thought for a second? Day one, giant door opens. I wonder if it was something like the lunar landing on the moon when Noah took that first step on dry land. He was the first person, the only person alive on the entire planet. Have you ever thought about that? It's nuts. I wonder how that shaped his life. Now, we get some snapshots moving forward. We see that Noah, in Genesis 9, he lives a total of 950 years, but it specifically calls out 350 years after the flood. What was that 350 years like? It just makes me wonder what was going through his head. The majesty of God. He got to not only see that God's promise came true, he lived through it, he got to experience it, now he's on the other side of it. And I bet for those 350 years, do you think any day passed that he ever forgot about the boat? I don't think so. It's just an interesting thought. I just wonder so much about things like this. I wonder if that experience gave him a sense of a new beginning. So we're going to transition over to the New Testament this morning. We're going to look at 3 different accounts. Now, these 3 accounts, the same miracle happened to each one of them. And just like Noah, they went through something spectacular, life-changing. And I wonder how it shaped their life moving forward. I wonder what kind of perspective or change in outlook occurred after this. We're going to talk about the 3 times that Jesus raised people from the dead. And we're going to dive into each one of them. So we're going to start, if you want to turn your Bibles over to Luke 7, we're going to read the first account. Luke 7, verses 11 through 17. Let's begin. Soon afterwards, Jesus went into a city called Nain, and his disciples were going along with him, accompanied by a large crowd. Now, as he approached the gate of the city, a dead man was being carried out, the only son of his mother. She was a widow, and a sizable crowd from the city was with her. When the Lord saw her, he felt compassion for her and said to her, "Do not go on weeping." And he came up and touched the coffin, and the bearers came to a halt. And he said, "Young man, I say to you, arise." And the dead man sat up and began to speak, and Jesus gave him back to his mother. Fear gripping them all, they began glorifying God, saying, "A great prophet has appeared among us. God has visited his people." And this report about him spread throughout Judea and all the surrounding region. Turn over a chapter, a couple of pages. We'll go to Luke 8. We're going to start in verse 40. Luke 8, verse 40. And as Jesus returned, the people welcomed him, for they all had been waiting for him. And there came a man named Jairus, and he was an official of the synagogue, and he fell at Jesus' feet, and he began to implore him to come to his house. For he had an only daughter, about 12 years old, and she was dying. But as he went, the crowds were pressing against him, and a woman who had a hemorrhage for 12 years and could not be healed by anyone came up behind him and touched the fringe of his cloak, and immediately her hemorrhage stopped. And Jesus said, "Who's the one that touched me?" And while they were all denying it, Peter said, "Master, the people are crowding in and pressing in all over you." But Jesus said, "No, someone did touch me, for I was aware of the power had gone out of me." And when this woman saw that she could not escape notice, she came trembling and fell before him and declared in the presence of all the people the reason why she had touched him and how she had been healed immediately. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." While he was still speaking, someone came from the house of that synagogue official saying, 'Your daughter has died. Do not trouble the teacher anymore.' But when Jesus heard this, he answered him, 'Do not be afraid any longer, only believe, and she will be made well.' When he came to the house, he didn't allow anyone to enter with him except Peter, John, James, and the girl's father and mother. Now they were all weeping and lamenting for her, but he said, 'Stop weeping, for she has not died, she's asleep.' And then they began laughing at him, knowing that she had died. He, however, took her by the hand and called, saying, 'Child, arise.' And her spirit returned, and she got up immediately. He gave orders for something to be given to her to eat, and her parents were amazed, but he instructed them to tell no one what had happened. Now we'll go over to the book of John. John chapter 11. We'll start in verse 1. Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and his sister Martha. It was Mary the one who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. So the sisters sent word to him, saying, 'Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick.' But when Jesus heard this, he said, 'The sickness will not end in death, but for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified by it.' Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was." Now we're going to skip down to verse 14. "So Jesus said to them plainly, 'Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let's go to him.' So when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb 4 days. Verse 20, "Martha, therefore, when she heard that Jesus was coming, went to meet him. But Mary stayed at the house. Martha said to him, 'Jesus, Lord, if you'd only been here, my brother would not have died. Even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you.' And Jesus said to her, 'Your brother will rise again.' Martha said to him, 'I know he'll rise again in the resurrection on the last day.' Jesus said to her, 'I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even if he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?' And she said to him, 'Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, even he who comes into the world.' Therefore, when Mary came where Jesus was," this is verse 32, "she saw him and fell at his feet, saying, 'Lord, if you'd only been here, my brother would not have died.' When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her were also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit, and he was troubled. He said, 'Where have you laid him?' They said to him, 'Lord, come and see.'" Verse 35, Jesus wept. Down to 38. "So Jesus again, being deeply moved within, came to the tomb. Now it was a cave with a stone laying against it. Jesus said, 'Remove the stone.' Martha, the sister of the deceased, said to him, 'Lord, by this time there's going to be a stench, for he's been dead 4 days.' Jesus said to her, 'Did I not say that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?' So they removed the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes and said, 'Father, I thank you that you have heard me. Now I knew you always hear me, but because of the people standing around, I say it, so that they may believe you sent me.' And when he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, 'Lazarus, come forth.' The man who had died came forth, bound hand and foot with wrappings, and his face was wrapped around with a cloth. Jesus said to them, 'Unbind him and let him go.'" Now, just like Noah, we get enough of the story here. 3 separate stories. An event happened, a miracle happened, story moves forward. But man, I have a lot of questions. I've got a lot of things I wonder about. But before we proceed any further, we need to realize there are certain things the Bible tells us and certain things the Bible does not tell us. There's certain things about heaven that's revealed to us and certain things that are not revealed to us. This morning, we're not going to dive into the subject of heaven. If you have questions on that, we don't want you leaving with your questions unanswered. Not too long ago, my dad gave a lesson on heaven, what we know, what we don't know, how the market presently is flooded with a lot of firsthand accounts of people who have died or near died or been resuscitated and what they saw. If you have any questions along those lines, I'd encourage you to listen to that. That lesson is available on our website. It's available on YouTube. The gentleman in the booth will be more than happy to get you a CD for free. The date is April 13th if you need it. I had to do my research to make sure I got that one right, but there's just going to be some questions we can't answer. And I just want you to remember that this is just going to be a speculative kind of lesson. But I think there's going to be some things we can take away from these accounts. Can you imagine being brought back to life? In that moment, when these three people were brought back to life, they and they alone shared something special with Jesus. They are now the only people that are on this side that have been to now both sides. And it makes me wonder, when they were raised up from the dead, their family was around them, I'm sure, hugs, kisses, love. But I wonder in that moment, did they share a look with Jesus when they saw him? He was there. He raised them. You know that kind of look like, I get it now. I've seen it. I understand. I don't know. But it makes me wonder what it was like for them. You know, we get little windows, little glimmers of heaven. John reveals to us in Revelation pictures of heaven. We get passages like the rich man and Lazarus, not this same Lazarus, but a different one, looking into paradise. But I wonder what it was like for them to be in paradise, then having to come back here to earth. You know, each of these are similar to Noah. They made it through a promise and they made it to the other side. But unlike Noah, he made it through probably one of the greatest events that ever happened here on earth, the flood. Complete start over here on earth. But these three, they made it through the other side of the promise, the other side of eternity. They were in paradise. Take a pause and think about the two children for a second. I've got two boys. Our job as parents, I love my children, shower them with love, nurture, comfort. But when they had crossed over to the other side, they received love perfected. They were receiving comfort perfected from God. And no matter what they get on this side, it would never compare to what they had already received on that side. It's an interesting thought. And I wonder, which each of these three, having been to the other side and now back on our side, like Noah, did that create a new beginning for them? They had seen the other side. They know what's at stake. They know where God is. They know where they want to be, and they know the comfort that awaits them. I wonder if it gave them a sense of a new beginning when growing up. You know, specifically thinking of these children, how did they handle growing up? Being around their peers, the stresses of trying to fit in, trying to fit into a world that consistently keeps going further and further away from God, pressures to conform, pressures to abandon what they've been taught. Having seen the other side, I wonder if that helped them hold firm. I wonder if it gave them a sense to evangelize. Now, too often as a child, at least at my own reflection, I think when I was younger, any topic of evangelism, I'd always just kind of shelf away thinking that, I'm young, that's an old person thing, I'll get to that when I'm older. But reflecting back, some of the easiest, and frankly, some of my most successful evangelism was when I was a kid. It was way easier. We all know each other growing up, middle school, high school, elementary school. We're in such a pressure cooker of an environment. I know my friends knew me. We grew up together. I'd stay at people's houses, people would stay at our house, and you better believe if there was ever a sleepover on a Saturday night, well, if they're at our house, we're all going to church. And if I was at their house, I'm still going to church. So if you're asleep, I'll be gone before you wake up. Easy. You know, I think sometimes as we get older, certain challenges get in the way. And yes, we need to work on those challenges. A lot of them are arbitrary, but there are some obstacles we don't have as children that we tend to have as an adult. You know, people knew who I was growing up. We grow up together. They knew my faith. They knew the things I was into. They knew the things I was not into. I was on several sports, athletic teams, and I don't know if I read more and more that this isn't really allowed, but when I was in school, and a smaller school in Missouri, but we'd pray before our athletic events. And it's interesting. The coaches would always ask me to lead our team prayer. Why? They knew me. They knew what I was into. And I'd have nicknames like Brother Joel or Preacher. Sometimes they just call me Rabbi, which I don't know, it didn't make sense, but we were kids. It didn't have to make sense. And yeah, I had other nicknames too, but those don't fit into the lesson, so we're not going to talk about those. But the point is, they knew me and they knew my faith. But as you progress to college and into young adulthood, evangelism does come harder. And a lot of times that's because the more down a path away from God you go, the more opportunity you're letting life get messy. Now, there's no sin greater than what God can forgive. But sometimes, if life gets really, really messy, that mess can be a big hindrance for people coming to Christ. There's a lot that they may need to repent from. There's a whole new lifestyle that they may not be willing to give up. There seems to be a little bit of a window where life isn't quite as complex. And in that zone, that's a perfect opportunity to evangelize. So for all of our kids, I don't want you to think that you're ever too young to bring your friends, too young to talk about God. You're too young to be useful to God. Absolutely not. In fact, if you wait too late, you may find that you've missed a bunch of opportunities. I wonder also with this new beginning, if it gave them a sense or gave them a change of outlook when it came time for them to face death for a second time. We don't know. How long did they live? We don't know. What was the end of their journey like for the second time? Yeah, we don't know. But I wonder how they handled it, knowing what was on the other side. I'm going to pause here for a quick second and dive into a tough subject. Now, each of these three scenes, we kind of see a similar scenario for all of them. I'm going to pop on now. This is dangerous. Here we go. Each of them, what do we see? Well, we see typically what we see when a loved one dies. Those who remain, they were sad, distraught, they're grieving. You know, death is a tough one to talk through. It's the worst. For a lot of people, brethren included, it can be a difficult subject. Early in my career, I worked in the ICU. And nobody goes to the ICU for a good time. In fact, people go to the ICU for their worst days. And in fact, a lot of people go to the ICU for their last days. It was my job trying to save death, stop death. And I'm not going to dive into medical advice or advanced directive advice. We're not taking that tangent with it. But I do want you to consider, have you ever thought about how you're going to handle your final days, your final moments? Have you ever considered those around you, how they're going to handle your final days and your final moments? You know, it's an odd phenomenon trying to save somebody's life. I really don't like talking about this a lot at all, but I got to be pretty good at giving compressions, chest compressions. I was one of few males at the time in my ICU, and so being a male, we were relegated a lot to the manual labor tasks. There's lots of things to do during a code situation, but got a strong back, so pump away. Well, I got so good at it that I was promoted to be on our code team, which just meant anytime, anywhere in the hospital, they'd send secret alarms or codes overhead. No matter what I was doing, where I was at, I was to stop, immediately run as fast as I could, flying upstairs as fast as I could, hopping down flights of stairs as fast as I could, all to get into this patient as quickly as I could, to hop in and try to stop them from dying. In those moments, running into a room, seeing somebody laying in front of me, knowing nothing about them. As I got up on top of them and started pounding away, I'd find myself saying the same prayer. It became my ritual. It's tough. I don't like talking about this. It's hard to get through. But as I was pounding away, I'd say, Lord, you're in control. Your will's going to be done. But if you'll allow it, help me do everything right to give this person one more day. Sometimes it worked, and sometimes he'd allow it. A lot of times he didn't. Those next moments were very interesting. When this person's journey is done, their life is over. The family then would need to be notified, and then they would come into the room. And we're not going to talk about grief and how you handle your grief, but there is something to be said because two accounts vividly stick out in my mind. There was one very tragic case, very tragic. Younger, did everything we could. We always do everything we could, but we really, extra gusto, pulled out all the stops, everything. We were in there a really long time. And unfortunately, the Lord's answer was no, and this person passed. The family was called in. It was very somber. Then they started to sing. I know this song. It was a hymn. They sang, "How Great Thou Art." This happened over 10 years ago, and vividly, I can still piece out where everybody was standing in the room. You guys know me. I love hymns. You best believe I joined right in with them, to the shock of everybody else in the room. Well, I didn't get to spend time with these people. I don't know their faith. I don't know. I unfortunately got called away to another emergency. I didn't get to dive in and talk to them. But I can tell you this, they left a lasting impression on me. I'm going to remember this the rest of my life. Now, the other side, similar situation, tragic. Unfortunately, they didn't make it. And when the family came in, instead of hymns and singing, violence, chaos, things were getting broken, smashed. Ultimately, security had to be called in. The police had to get called in, and they had to be escorted out. As they were getting escorted out, death threats were made against me. There were 7 other people standing there. I don't know how I got singled out, but I got singled out. I must have that kind of face, I guess. But that stuck with me because for the next 2 months, I had to be escorted out to my car by security. Thankfully, nothing happened. But it's just an interesting contrast to know people who have the hope of the other side. Now, yes, we can be sad. There's nothing wrong. Again, I'm not diving into how we grieve, but the contrast of knowing that death is just a door, how my dad likes to say it, versus when we don't have that hope and the sheer agony, the misery of hopelessness when we think this is it. I wonder how Lazarus and those 2 children handled death. We don't know. But I wonder if they were able to have a little pep talk with their loved ones around them. And if the Lord allowed it, and if everything lined up, when it came time for round 2, I wonder if they had a little conversation. I don't know. I know it's going to be sad to see me go, but remember, our separation's only temporary. Promise you I'm going to be well taken care of. In fact, I'm going to be better off than you are. Sooner or later, you're going to come join me on the other side, and you're going to finally be able to see what I've been telling you all these years. I don't know if it went something like that or not, but these 3 had such a unique experience. They were brought back to life. They got to see what we hope for. They got to experience what we all want to experience. I wonder if that instilled in them a new beginning. We don't get that same luxury. But we have some things that they don't have. We have God's completed word. It's His plan. It's His roadmap. If we simply follow this, trust in this, we have everything we need to make sure when our time ends, we know where we're going. We get to see that other side. And just like their opportunity at a new beginning, we too are given an opportunity at a new beginning. All He asks is for us to believe in Him, to be baptized. You know, baptism is just a symbolization of what they just went through as well, what Christ goes through to be put to death, buried in water, to be risen up, a new man, free of sin. We are afforded a new beginning. How does this shape your life knowing that? We've all been given this opportunity. Revelation 20. Then I saw a great white throne and him who sat on it, from whose appearance the earth and the heaven fled, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, the great and the small, standing before the throne. And books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged from the things which were written in the books, according to their deeds. And the sea gave up their dead who were in it. Death and Hades gave up the dead who were in them. And they were all judged, each of them according to their deeds. This morning, if you haven't accepted Christ, if you haven't started this new beginning, our only ask is that you just consider it. This can be you. You can have a brand new beginning. What's holding you back? Why not now? We never know what's around the corner. Life is fragile. We know that. Why not have the assurance of knowing where you are headed? Why not give peace of mind for those around you to know that when your time is done, you're okay. And in fact, you're going to be better off than they are. Yeah, it's sad when we leave. It's sad when we leave this earth. But having this new beginning, it takes a lot of that pain away. And in fact, I bet these three, I bet when round 2 came for them, I bet they were looking forward to it because they got to see it. For those of us who are Christians, we know what's before us. We know it. We've accepted it. We believe in it. We're living it. Are you living today like you're going to meet Jesus face to face? Are you living today prepared for what's to come? Are you living today like we're headed home? If this lesson's been helpful for you, or if you need our assistance in any way, please come forward as we stand and as we sing.